Hi, my name is Allie Koenig, and today I'm going to present to you my 20-week strength and conditioning program for a vertical jump. So a vertical jump is basically testing how high you can jump, and using this we use a Vertec machine, and this is displayed down in the bottom left of the picture. And for the vertical jump, the athlete's basically standing in a hip width to a little bit of a shoulder width distance apart and feet facing forward. And first in the test, it's important to measure when they're standing up. You want to have their hand all the way as high as they can go, not standing on their tippy toes, keeping their weight back on their heels, and you're measuring the height from their hand distance. From there is where you can measure on how high you're going to raise the Vertec up and down to meet the requirements of their jump. So the athlete's going to want to stand, like I said, hip width apart in an athletic stance, using the momentum of their arms to drive them up forward, as you can kind of see in this picture down here, to get the best read possible. Now the important thing for that is they're going to want to use their dominant hand. Obviously they're going to have better opportunity hitting the marks with their dominant hand than their less dominant hand, and you want to get the most important read as possible. In my test, I give the athlete as many attempts as possible until there's a 2 failure in a row period. Once they've failed twice in a row, I'll mark what their score was. So the athlete candidate that I picked was an 18-year-old male Division I college baseball player, and it's the classification of this athlete is a freshman. So here it's important they're going into their first year of true college athletics and lifting. So you have to remember, keeping in the background, have they lifted Olympic-style lifts before? What kind of area did they grow up in? I'm from a large suburb of Dallas, so our high schools are really focused on not only academics but athletics as well. And prior coming into me playing college soccer, I had the experience of learning the Olympic lifts and really understanding them, and then when I got here, I was able to fine-tune them. So for my athlete, we focused on the non-season training period, and towards the end of our 20 weeks, he will be indeed in the beginning of his season play. So a type of style and lifting in the equipment that I used is called Pure Motion, and Pure Motion is located in Pelham, Alabama, and they have designed unique equipment to use when training athletes in more of a sport-specific stance. And so when we focus on Olympic-style lifts, we tend to be back on our heels, hip width apart, shoulder width apart, especially shoulder width apart for squats, power cleans, and there's still explosive movements, but you run into a lot of problems of especially male athletes trying to muscle their way up rather than the technique of it. And so with Pure Motion, I partnered with my boss and head strength coach of Jacksonville State, Coach Scott Austin, and we were able to test with the makers of Pure Motion. And basically, as I'll show you later in the PowerPoint, there's different equipment they use that they actually attach to a barbell at the end of the rack. And so if you're doing power cleans, for example, instead of your hands being out here lifting up the bar into a clean, they actually made this mechanism where when you're lifting it, the handles of the bars turn, and instead of putting so much pressure on the wrists, you're putting more power and focus on those legs and explosive muscles. And so with this, we were able to test using this equipment primarily is focused on baseball. And so we tested baseball through the beginning prior to their season to right at the end before going into season, and we realized a lot of our athletes improved their vertical jump by 2 to 3 inches. And so it was a cool experience to get to work with him and not only also go to the Pure Motion facility and go through some of their workouts. They're very, very different. You'll notice that from doing a squat max, one rep max, to power clean 1 rep max, and using their equipment, they like to focus a lot of emphasis on higher reps, and that way you're getting more of the technique. And so you would think leaving the next day or the third day, as we mentioned in class, you'd be super, super sore, but to find out it's actually not as sore as what you would think. And also what I liked about it is being a prior athlete, I've had 3 knee surgeries, and so squatting and power cleans aren't really comfortable for me, but using this type of equipment, being in that ready stance on the balls of your feet rather than back on your heels, I've noticed that it didn't really cause me any pain. So here you can see some of their equipment. Here you have an AirFit band, and this is used a lot of shoulder work, core work, stuff like that. Here you have this attachment like I kind of mentioned before. It's called the Renegade. And you can do different styles of squats, lunges, and it's kind of seen here too. And this we use in the workout I've created for baseball specific, in a hitting motion, and they're called uppercuts, and they're actually swinging through using those hips. Here's the actual Renegade, the attachment. Down here are just some styles of lifts that they have used to create, so power cleans, snatches, squats. This is actually the attachment that I mentioned earlier, and this is more for power cleans and clean to jerk. And what's cool is you can actually place a weight plate on the front of it to kind of balance it, as well as the sides. And here's the handles that I mentioned right here, the orange ones, as you can see, that kind of turn. And then this is just an example of an athlete going into the power clean motion. So the phases that I focused on in this workout were the reintegration phase, which was the first week of testing and kind of getting the athlete used to the style of lifting that we were going to progress through our 20-week phase. And so it wasn't too heavy on the body. Again, I just wanted to focus on the lifts and actually kind of getting into that, as well as we did our testing. So the first day on a Monday, did our true vertical test and got the information for that. On a Wednesday, we focused on a power clean 1 rep max, and then on Friday, we focused on a squat 1 rep max. That way we can get our percentages based on through the workouts throughout the phase. The next phase I focused was the strength phase. And again, this was more of your major and minor muscles, so we incorporated your true lifts, your power clean, your squat, your bench press, and stuff like that. And then the minor muscles, more the plyometrics, so we focused on speed skater, split squats, some core work, that really explosive steps and movements to get that heart rate up, as well as building those power muscles for explosion. And then going on later, we did an unload week, and so we retested the athlete around, I believe, week 8, and kind of just got a broad piece of information to kind of go off of and continuing our workout. And from there, we stepped back into a speed strength phase, building those muscles, going off of the percentages I said, going into another unload week in week 13, retesting the athlete, again building that strength back up, and finishing with a speed strength, kind of slowing down as the athlete's beginning to go into the bigger steps of season, and then the final testing. So now I'm going to walk you through those and kind of explain. So like I mentioned, the reintegration phase is the first day. They'll come in, they'll do their vertical true test. Again, on that Wednesday, they'll focus on the power clean 1 rep max, and then Friday, the squat 1 rep max. And this is just, again, kind of showing our athlete our style of workout, what they're going to be doing, what's expected. We're always going to come in, we're always going to do some dynamic warm-ups, some dynamic stretching, and we're always going to stretch at the end to keep those muscles not so tight and loose. Going into the strength phase, after 2 weeks, getting a true number, and we focus on 75% to 85% of their 1 rep max on these lifts. They'll be maintained, again, like through a setting of Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and the athlete, that also goes according to their practice time and class time. So the unload week, throughout the 20-week program, like I told you, there's going to be 2 unload weeks, week 9 and week 8 and 13. And I will retest the athlete and still implementing the percentages, but we're going to drop those percentages down into a 55-60% range. Again, we're not trying to kill the athlete, but we still want to focus on those true muscles, those exploding muscles from the quads to the hamstrings to the hip flexors, protecting those IT bands and stuff like that. So next, we're going to go in the speed strength phase, and this is the phase that we really incorporated pure motion. We're still sticking to percentages. We're dropping them down a little bit from 65 to 75% and focusing on more of an explosion style lift. And so with that, there's going to be a little bit longer rest time in between each sets and reps to, slow that heart rate back down and give them a true good workout, honestly. And so with the explosion and speed strength phase, we also focused on a little bit of baseball-specific workouts. And that's kind of where I mentioned before, the uppercuts you'll see in the program designed. They're still explosive, they're still getting those hips through, but they're also building muscle for specifically their sport. As I mentioned, in the core lifts and the major lifts, bench press is one of them, and I tended to focus on dumbbells instead of the barbell. With dumbbells, I feel you have a little bit more control, and especially with baseball players, you don't want to overuse those shoulders. You want to protect those shoulders. That's what they use primarily, obviously, in their sport. And so with dumbbells, you drop the weight a little bit, still focusing on the percentages. You can still get your percentages with them, but you're building the muscles more around, the important rotator cuff and stuff like that, and still giving the strength for them to be able to follow through in that throw. So the second unload week, we're going to retest their vertical, again with their power clean and their squat, And so with that, we're hoping obviously to build strength in this 13th week, and so that we're going to get new percentage numbers to go off of. We're still going to focus on the same percentage numbers, but obviously the weight's going to increase because they've gotten stronger throughout the training. So we're back down to the strength phase, the second strength phase of the 20-week program. And again, as I mentioned, the number of percentages, the percentage number is still going to stay the same, but the weight's going to increase because they've gained muscle. They've gained, at this point, fine-tuned the true way to lift instead of just muscling their way up and through it. And the great thing with Pure Motion is, you're standing, leaning into the machine. And so that way, if me as a trainer or a coach or whatever is walking around, and that bar, if they're standing too parallel, is going to slide out and slide back in. And that way the athlete knows, as well as the trainer or the coach, whoever you're specifically working with, is knowing that, the athlete needs to stand more in specific, leaning more into the machine on the balls of their feet, get back off those heels, standing straight up. We're going to lean, we're going to focus, we're exploding. In most sports we play, you're not back on your heels waiting for a ball or a pass or whatever. You're always on those balls of their feet ready to go. So the speed strength, again, hitting those Pure Motion spots, as well as kind of dropping down the percentages a little bit. We're getting more towards the end of our 20-week program, as well as the athletes preparing to go into season. So we don't want to overuse those muscles. We want to kind of protect them as well. And then here we are in the final testing where we hope to get our results. And as I mentioned, working with Coach Austin throughout, these last 2 years that I've been a grad assistant, it's been really interesting to kind of work and be a tester of this Pure Motion training. And as I mentioned before, working with those athletes, we worked on a program in the beginning of their off season, towards the end of them going into season, and we noticed that, especially with guys, they want to muscle, they want to work on those huge lifts and get the biggest max and all that stuff, but working with their true different kind of equipment, we noticed that a lot of the guys, most of all of them, improved their vertical jump by 2 to 3 inches. And so I just want to reference that I use Coach Scott Austin, again, the head strength and conditioning coach of Jacksonville State University, as well as the Pure Motion training facility located in Pelham, Alabama. I've attached Coach Austin's email as well as the website to Pure Motion if you want more information. But this definitely was an awesome project to work on, especially working in the weight room and getting to design some workouts with some specific teams. This one was definitely a learning experience. And so thank you.